Welcome back to Oil and Soil. Today we're doing a video that I've been really excited about for a while. We're gonna make fresh milled sourdough bread. It's gonna be fantastic. So stick with us and we'll show you exactly how we're gonna get into it. Rise when the bread gets in the oven. And then I just like to do a couple slits. All right, we got a fantastic rise on both our loaves. Before we get started, you're gonna need to grab a few things. We're gonna put measurements of all these down in the comments, and as we make the bread, we're gonna talk about the measurements of each one of these. But make sure you grab your water brought up to room temp, your grains or your bread flour, your starter, and if you're doing this with a fresh mill, grab your mill. You do not have to have a mill to make this recipe. We're gonna put the different measurements if you're going to make this with bread flour in the description and comments below. So don't worry, stick with us either way, whether you have a mill or whether you don't. Our first step in making our bread is to mill all of our fresh grain. We've done a couple of videos where we've shown how to use the Wonder Mill, but we'll just do a quick tutorial. We're going to want to cut this on for a couple seconds before we put our fresh grain in, and we're going to make sure our setting is where we want it. I've got mine slightly below the bread setting here to give us a nice grind on our mill on our flour. That should make nice consistency for our bread. And now we're gonna mill it. One of the most important steps when making bread is to make sure that your starter is ready, and it's the combination of your starter and your room temperature water. Today we're gonna make 2 loaves of bread, so I've doubled my recipe. Here in this water bowl, I've got about 780 grams of water that's been brought up to room temp, so 70 to 75 degrees. And that's gonna help continue to activate our starter, and it's gonna help when we auto-lees our bread for a little while. So in here, we've got our starter. We'll give you a close-up shot of that. You can see that our starter's nice and bubbly. It's ready to go, and we're gonna do one final test of that to see if it floats in the water. Since our starter looks ready to go, we're gonna weigh out 225 grams of starter into our water. We're gonna put it in the water and make sure it floats. If it doesn't float, it means your starter's not ready and you need to give it a little bit more time. So typically what we'll do is we'll test with a spoonful to make sure that it's ready to go. So we're gonna do a quick test of our starter. That didn't work. Oh, that's not ready. Guys, our starter was obviously a complete flop. So we got some fresh starter. We got starter that floated. Don't worry, we're gonna have good fermented sourdough bread that's gonna rise, but that was a complete flop. Probably good YouTube fodder, but not what you want when you're trying to make bread for lots of people. We're gonna do 2 loaves today, so I've doubled this up. It's 1,000 grams of bread flour. I'm gonna put the description below for 1 loaf of bread, so if you just wanna make 1, you can do that instead of 2. But in our family, we always need more than 1 loaf, so we always double this recipe up. Now that we have our starter and our room temp water mixed and our flour milled, we're gonna add the water and the starter to the flour. Make sure we get all that in there. And there's a lot of ways to do this, but I find that sometimes it's best just to get your hands in there, get really dirty, mix this up, and get it combined as best as possible. It's gonna be really messy at first, but the more you mix it, the more it's gonna come together, and it's gonna eventually form into a ball of dough that we can work with. And this is gonna prep us for our next step, which is letting this sit in what we call auto-lees for about 45 minutes to an hour. It's gonna help everything get combined. And when you do fresh milled flour, it absorbs a ton of water. So we wanna give it time to let all of that water absorb. Isn't this fun, family? This is a bit like playing with a mud pie. I feel like I'm 5 years old when I'm making bread. This is one of my favorite recipes to make at home. I know I'm making a lot of mess for you guys on the video. But you can see our bread's starting to really come together, starting to get less sticky. And we are getting closer to forming that ball. All right. All right. So like I said, don't be afraid to get a little bit messy when you do this. Get your hands in there. I promise you, if you wash it soon enough, it'll come off with a little bit of water. If you leave it on too long, this stuff will turn like concrete. One other quick tip, when you get this out of this bowl, when you're finished, I make sure I always soak it in water immediately. That stops all this from hardening on this bowl. Okay, all right, we've got this pretty well mixed up. And like I said, we're gonna get a water-soaked towel, and we're gonna let this sit for about 45 minutes to an hour. Now that we've got our flour, water, and starter mixed together, we like to just put a wet towel over the bowl and let it sit. Our bread's nice and rested, so now it's time for us to pull the top off. We're gonna put our salt in. We're gonna use 30 grams of salt. I know that may sound like a lot, but we're doing 2 loaves. We're gonna mix it in, and this bread's gonna be stretched and folded several times, so it's gonna mix in really nicely. Like we did earlier, we're really gonna get our hands in there. We're gonna get this mixed in really well. It can help to keep the bread off your hands if you get them a little bit moist before you put them in the bowl. Don't you love that word, moist? It's one of my favorite words. But just mix this around really good, and then we're gonna do a stretch and fold. I'll show you how we do that. Our bread is ready for our first stretch and fold, and this is as simple as it sounds. You wanna pull your bread up and fold it over. Turn the bowl, pull up your bread, fold it over. Turn the bowl, pull up your bread, fold it over. Turn the bowl. For our last stretch and fold, gonna get that back into a nice round ball. We're gonna put our towel back over the top. And now it's time to go proof. All right, fans, we've got our bread ready to go. We've got it covered with a wet towel here. We've done our first stretch and fold. Now it's time to proof it in the oven. Really important with this step, you don't want your lights on. The proofing is very sensitive. If the temperature gets too high, it'll kill all of the nice bacteria we're developing in here to break down the gluten in the bread. So just be careful, keep it on proof. Try not to open the oven too much, and don't turn the lights on. We're gonna proof this for about 2.5 hours. Every 30 minutes, we're gonna pull the bread out and we're gonna do another stretch and fold. We'll show you a couple of those. And then once we're done with that, we'll pull the bread out and we'll start to get it in our bannetons and get it prepped for cooking later tonight. We've got a nice proofing function on our oven. Not everybody does, and the good news is you don't need it. All you really need is a nice, good, warm spot to rest your bread so it can continue to rise and develop that bacteria. So a couple areas that you can do this are in a sunroom, on a windowsill for a warm day, or you can set it on top of where your dishwasher is. That will produce a little bit of heat and keep the bread warm. The main thing is you just keep it warm through the process and it will continue that rise. All right, fans, we've got our bread here. We've done 3 folds so far. It's time to do our 4th and final fold. So we're gonna do that really quickly. Now that we've completed our folds, we're gonna get the bread back into the oven for a couple hours to finish proofing. And when that's finished, we're gonna get the bread out on the countertop and we're gonna do a final stretch and fold and put it in bannetons. Once we put it in the bannetons, we're gonna let it rest in the fridge and continue to cold rise for several hours. Our bread's finished proofing. It's time to get it out and get it on the bench. We've got a really nice rise here on the bread. It's almost doubled in size, so it's time to get it on the bench. We're gonna separate it using our bench scraper. I try to get this as close as I can as to being halved. You can weigh it if you want. I don't typically do that. So before we do our final folds and we put our bread in our bannetons, what I like to do is just give it a nice final stretch. And once that's done, once we let it like kind of push around on here and stretch the gluten out a little bit more, there we go, got a nice ball. We'll do an overhead of the next one to show you what that looks like. We're gonna let this sit for 10 to 15 minutes and kind of rest here with a wet towel on it. Okay, so we're gonna do the second one, but we'll give you an overhead view so you can see what I'm doing. So what we like to do here is just kind of use the counter. If your bread's too sticky, if you're doing a high hydration, you may want to put a little bit of flour on the counter so it doesn't stick too much. But you can see how we kind of want to just stretch this out a little bit and get a nice kind of bubbly crust on it. What that'll do is when we do our cook in the oven, it'll give us a really, really nice outer crispy, light crust. and it'll let the inside be really nice and airy. All right, so we got our 2 balls of dough here. Like I said, we're gonna cover those up with our wet towel, and we're gonna let it rest for about 15 minutes. Our loaves are now rested, and now we can get to folding them. Move this one out of the way. All right, so the first one we're gonna do is our oblong loaf. We're gonna stretch out, and we're gonna do a couple of letter folds on this. There we go, continue to stretch it. Got a nice letter fold. And then we can do some additional folds into the center like this. I've got that nice and tucked up. And now we're just gonna roll it. All right. So we got a nice rectangular loaf here. And we're gonna put that in our banneton. So what you wanna do is take your bench scraper, flip it over, and we're gonna put it in our banneton. We're gonna set that one aside. All right, now we're gonna do a round loaf. We're gonna flip it over. And again, I said earlier, if you need to, you can put some flour on your bench if this is sticking too much. 1 fold, 2 stretch and folds. It's our 3rd stretch and fold, and then we'll do a final 4th. Then we're gonna flip this over. We're gonna form a nice round loaf like we did earlier. All right, we've got a really, really pretty loaf here. And we're gonna put this in our round banneton. All right, we're gonna cover these up with 2 very fancy shower caps. So there's one for my oblong, and here's one for our round. All right, 2 nice loaves ready to go in the fridge. We're so glad you've joined us on this journey to make our own bread at home from fresh mill grain. We're nearing the end of our journey here. So we're gonna talk really quickly before we get the bread in the oven about the containers that we cook it in. We got 2 right here that we will typically use when we cook. One's round. This is wonderful for your round type loaves that are a little bit smaller. And then we've got an oblong version here that's wonderful for oblong loaves, the wider loaves of bread. But also you could do a couple of baguettes in these, and those turn out really fantastically. We're gonna be doing a video on that soon. But for today, we're gonna warm our oven up to 500 degrees, and we're gonna let these sit in there for about 30 minutes, maybe 45 to an hour. What that does is let them heat up so they can retain the heat for when we open the door and put the bread in. That way we don't lose any heat, and our bread rises really quickly once they get in the pans. Our ovens are preheated. Now it's time to cook. We got our 2 loaves here that have been sitting in the refrigerator for several hours, and there's just one thing left to do before we get them in the oven, and that's to score them. I got a couple pizza pans here with some parchment paper on them, and what I'll do is I'll flip these over. I'll trim the parchment paper a little bit to give myself some handles to put the bread over into the pans with. But what we'll do now is we'll show you a visual of how we score these, each one of these, the oblong loaf and the round loaf. Like I said, first we're gonna cut the paper a little bit to make it easy to put our bread into the oven. Give ourselves a couple handles. Doesn't have to be pretty, and this certainly is not. All right, so now we can pull off our top. Got a razor blade here. You can do this a lot of ways. You can cut across or you can cut over. For these round loaves, I like to do 1 cut here and 1 cut here. You want to score deep, score fast, so you can get a nice rise when the bread gets in the oven. And then I just like to do a couple slits around the edges. That one's ready to go. Now we'll do our oblong loaf. We'll do the same thing with our oblong loaf. We'll cut around for the paper, give ourselves some nice little handles. And then And we'll trim a little bit of this off because we don't want too much hanging out of the pan once we get it in the oven so it won't burn. All right, beautiful oblong loaf there. We'll score this one across the top. And again, we want to do one quick, swift motion. And I like to come back and just cut underneath a little bit here. That should help us open up just a little bit more. And then for these, I like to just do 3 small slits on the side. We used to live in Amsterdam, so I'll do X's sometimes. That'll give us a nice throwback to living in Holland. We've got both of our beautiful sourdough loaves scored here and ready to go in the oven. We've cut the oven down to 450 degrees, and we're going to cook these for 28 minutes for our first cook while they're in the pans. After that, we're going to cut the oven off, we're going to remove the lids of the pans, and we're going to let them sit and brown for about another 7 minutes. Our bread's been cooking for 28 minutes, so it's time to pull the tops and see how it looks. All right, we got a fantastic rise on both our loaves. We don't have to do the full 7 minutes probably here, but we'll put them back in with the oven off for a few minutes and let them finish browning up.
A few moments later.
Our bread is done. We've got 2 beautiful loaves here. They came out just the way we wanted them to. Nice rise, nice brown on them. Instead of taking the final 7 minutes, I kept an eye on them. At around 4.5 minutes, they were ready to come out. The other thing I will tell you is that you need to let these sit for at least an hour, if not 2 or 3. Let the inside finish baking. If you cut them too soon, they'll be really gummy on the inside, and you won't have that premium, airy, nice bread that you would normally get when you cook home-style bread. Oil and Soul fans, thank you for joining us again here on the channel. We would love for you to subscribe. We would love your comments down below. Please tell us if you do bread differently, how you do it, so you can help our other fans. We'll see you next week with another great video on cooking. If you like this video, join Oil and Soul for more family-friendly cooking content.